Our panel. This is challenges to builders and developers to building affordable housing. I'm Mark Sneesavage. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the Fredericksburg Area Builders Association. And we'll start off with some introductions, and then we've got a series of questions I'll ask our panelists, and then we'll open it up to question and answer after we're done.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Hicks. I'm with Gerald Properties, Inc., a land development company here in the city of Fredericksburg. I'm a recovering attorney. I've only been in the industry for about 4 years. I see some familiar faces out there. I know some of you know that story, but for those of you that don't, I'm not the expert on this panel today. The guys next to us are the people we're lucky to have with us today. But right out the gate, one of the challenges I think we have in the industry is that we have conversations like you've heard this morning over and over again, but we have them in small contexts. We have them one-on-one, one-on-two. So one of the first challenges that I think we're starting to achieve or get past today is getting everyone in the room, getting the citizens, getting the realtors, getting some of the government officials all in the room so we can have this conversation and start the ball rolling, because it is a snowball running downhill that's only getting bigger and more challenging. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to GWRC for giving us this opportunity.
Hello, I'm Dan Sandoval, president of Republic Home Builders here in Fredericksburg. I'm a scattered site builder. I'm also the state rep to the National Home Builders Association board for the Fredericksburg Area Builders Association. And again, I'm glad to be here and have these conversations. Also, like Jay said, that we deal with this when the problems occur, we complain about it, and being builders and developers, we move on because we have to, because time is money. And I'm glad to be able to have this forum today. Hopefully we can get some good questions from you guys, and maybe we can come up with some solutions so we can stop some of the bleeding. Building's getting more and more challenging. I kind of say there's not one problem. It's sort of the death by 1,000 cuts, and we're slowly bleeding out. But hopefully we can find some resolution, common ground.
I'm Mike Jones with the Tricord Companies. Began developing back in the late 70s and moved to Virginia in the 80s, and here started in Northern Virginia and here to Fredericksburg in the late 80s. At that time we were surviving a recession, and so we became very active in home building as well as land development, and have done a number of communities around the region. And we've had a strong interest in the affordable housing market for decades, and have been interested in different ways to accomplish that and skin the cat. So this is a topic that's very dear to my heart personally, and something that as a company we've been very interested in and endeavored to deal with over the years.
Great, thank you guys. We'll start off with our first question. According to Freddie Mac's most recent estimates, the United States is still short about 3.8 million units of housing for both sale and rent. Between January 2020 and June of 2023, home prices increased by 42%, indicating there are simply not enough homes for sale and more supply is needed, according to the National Association of Realtors. What are the main reasons why home builders aren't building more housing to keep up with demand and to ease rising prices?
Well, I'll start with something that we call the 3 L's, and now I think it's the 4 L's, and it's something they talked about earlier today. Land is one of them. That's one of our biggest obstacles. There's just not enough of it. Labor, and then it was lumber. Lumber sort of settled down, but the whole supply chain overall has been an issue. And then loans. Of course, in recent months or in the last year, we're dealing with high interest rates. That's certainly affecting why we can't build affordable. On the labor front, we can fix that. As an industry, we're working hard to work with the school systems, and I know there's some here today that we have programs with our association that we're trying to help support those and bring a fresh labor pool, a younger labor pool into our industry. But land is, and I talk to builders across the country, that's the number one challenge they have. There's just not enough land to build on. There's not the will to redevelop lots and put them into, that we can have them on the ground. There's such a shortage of that, and I know Mike can speak to that better than I can.
Let me come at that from a little different angle, because as we heard from Brian earlier, there's an ample supply of homes for folks that make an adequate amount of money. So the real challenge is the lower income folks, or folks making below the area median income. And so I think the real problem, the reason we have an issue, and Dan, not to disagree, but it's not that we don't have land. It's that the land we have is, we're not allowed to build the houses that we need to build. So at the real core of this issue is the fact that zoning, as we heard today, entitlements, the ability, the political will to do these things doesn't exist. And so we could, I would argue that supply, if there's a need in the market, the business community allowed to make a normal profit will step up and meet that need. And so there are ways to address that need, but what our real problem is that zoning, or the ability to build, is restricted or controlled by local governments. I assume everybody in this room understands that the land use is a primary function of local government. It doesn't happen at a federal level or a state level. It's individual throughout the nation. And so even in this room, there's 5 different local governments represented. They all have to deal with this issue independently. And so that's the real challenge, is that at a local level, we're not willing to do these things. And to take that a step further, I don't want to just point the finger at politicians, because honestly, they're responding to their constituency. And so at the bottom of the real issue is that as a community, we don't care as much about housing as we care about other issues. And we as a developer face this all the time. We propose projects that may have affordable housing or meet a need that we're discussing today, but the reality is that folks prioritize more traffic, they prioritize more kids in the schools, they prioritize the value of their home not being influenced by somebody that makes less than them. And so the public, we, the citizens, say no. And so we're the reasons that we have a shortage of housing at the bottom of the, that's simply the truth, I think.
And kind of tying into that, I think it really comes into a sense of political will. Mike touched on it, and I think that's relative to the citizens and what the politicians are hearing from their constituents. But without the political will to accept that we are a popular area of growth and make accommodations for people to live in our communities, there's no real ability to deliver them. Restrictions come up, hurdles come up, obstacles are presented to keep us from being able to deliver those lots at an affordable market rate and at a pace that can satisfy the demand. We need to understand that this is an issue that's not going away, and we need to find ways to be creative about the solution. And that has to happen in conjunction with the government entities. The government entities are restricting us with zonings, ordinances, and other restrictions, and the result is the higher priced home. When we have the higher priced home, then we are inviting other people into our community that can afford those homes. People that live in Fredericksburg aren't buying the $750,000 homes. They're coming from somewhere else. So as a result, without that political will, those that are living in Fredericksburg, those that have been raised in Fredericksburg, are left to struggle with that affordable, or what I prefer to say, the attainable option.
Regulations imposed by all levels of government account for $93,000, or close to 24% of the current average sales price of a home, of a single-family home, according to a recent study. Of that $93,000 figure, $41,000 is attributable to regulation during development, and $52,000 is due to regulation during construction. What are some regulatory hurdles or bureaucratic processes that you've encountered when trying to develop or build housing?
You know, some of the things that we see with regulatory and the cost of construction, one of the things, and again, this happens on sort of a national level, but then also on a state level, because we do have a statewide building code. But the energy efficiency is driving the cost of construction up at a rate that's just unprecedented, to where the 2021 energy code is essentially a net zero code, meaning that you could put solar panels on the thing and live off the grid. And we're just not there yet, and that's driving the cost up so fast that we can't keep up. We see things at the state level, at the building code, that get introduced, and then we run the calculations to see, okay, how much more, what's the payback on that? And we're seeing 20, 30, 40 years at times to go to higher just insulation levels in a house. And it just doesn't make sense. So the thing that we could do, and the people in this room, there are code officials that get to vote on the ICC. We need them to show up and make smart decisions when they vote on that, to kind of hold that at bay. Yeah, we can get there, but give us time. It can't be tomorrow we've got to turn the switch and be there. It's the electrification that's coming, that we see things that we're having to do with wiring the houses now for all EV chargers in your garage bays. I mean, it's incremental, but when you start adding everything up, it just drives the cost of housing up.
I'll add one thought. I thought we heard it expressed really well earlier today when it was referred to as the death by 1,000 cuts. And the part of that that I think it gets overlooked is the time. Time is money, and that extra time that gets added to a project costs us as the developer thousands, millions of dollars sometimes. It's amazing, and people don't appreciate how much the value of time. It's not free, and it really does contribute significantly to the cost of a house.
And I think the combination of those two is the environmental stuff is huge with us. Stormwater management, planning is something that I think consumes 40% of our time and money when we're developing a property, and that's because of all the extensive regulations that come from Richmond, some of which are certainly reasonable and understood, but sometimes it's the overreaching that gets hard to understand. Dan mentioned the building code and some of the things that we have to battle against in order to try and keep costs down. And an example that just blows my mind from the last session and review for the building code is the proposition that we had bird-free windows. We have that there be a requirement to install windows that would prevent birds from flying into them, bringing the windows that cost 3 times more than a regular window. So those things add up quickly. And another point that Mike just made as far as time is I was thinking of the efficiency of our working with the government and multiple plan submissions. There are times when in the counties and city, don't mean to leave the city out, so I didn't do that, but we'll have 5 or 6 submissions of plans before we can get to approval, and that takes up time, takes up money, and prevents us from being able to deliver affordable.
Many jurisdictions have residential community design standards. Can you explain some of these design requirements and how it affects the total cost of a project?
Well, that just is like the environmental things. It's a conflictuous thing for me. We want to deliver properties that have good guidelines. We want to have a property that looks good and it delivers for its residents. So in that sense, I would say it's driven by, again, political will. If we're in a place where we want to propose a project, we do physical impact analysis, we do proffer narratives to try and figure out what the cost of bringing our project onto the jurisdiction will be. And I can tell you that we're not going to propose a project that shows we're going to cost a county or jurisdiction money. Incumbent is that the counties are desirable of the upper end, high end market product. And so we feel the guidelines are necessary to satisfy the jurisdictions, which thereby drives up the costs, and does have an effect on the end product and what we're able to deliver.
I know it, and this isn't in our area, but it happened down, I think, in Henrico County, and this is a few years back, but there were proffers proposed by local government for the interior finishes of a project, specifying granite countertops, specifying hardwood floors, and a few other things. It just, again, drove the cost of that up. You know, as builders and developers, we want to build nice products. We want to build things that sell. It doesn't do us any good to put a lot of bells and whistles into a house that's going to be overbuilt for what our market research says it's going to do. So we take the time, we do the plan. We know what, I've yet to build a house that's still vacant. Somebody buys the thing. But we have to have the ability, like right now as things are changing in our market, we have to have the flexibility to say, okay, maybe we don't put so much into that house right now to keep the price down so people can continue to afford it. But if we're dictated to have to do certain architectural requirements on a house, we just don't have the flexibility. The price has to stay up. It's a simple arithmetic for me. I just go down, this is what it cost me to build, this is what what I've got to cover in overhead, and here's the profit I can make.
Let me speak to that from a land standpoint. Most people don't think about design in terms of land, but there's an element here that's very important. When we think about a subdivision, most of what comes to your mind is a big, wide state road that's got houses every, 60, 80, 100 feet on both sides, with sidewalks and curb and gutter, and that's it. That's how we envision housing. And we need to, part of the solution is thinking about land design differently and recognizing there are different ways to do housing than the way we've always done it. And yet our ordinances, our regulations, and now each of the areas is different. So I can't say generically, but what we run into is we're not allowed to design communities differently. To give you an example, if I'm building a street and I have to put in 100 feet of road and have one house on each side, that's an extremely expensive proposition. Well, what if I could simply go down and put in a shared driveway on each side, maybe 6 houses fed off of that 100 feet, and did the same thing on the other side. Well, now I've got 12 houses on 100 feet of state road, and I just dropped the cost tremendously of each of those houses because I'm thinking differently. Or what if we designed a community where, instead of having a big wide two-way street, sort of like small loops where we're one way, but the roads were half as large. Well, that may be a little bit of an inconvenience. You can't just go any way you want. You got to go this way to get around. But I've just cut the cost of the house tremendously. But I'm not allowed to do any of those things because our regulations don't allow creative design and as it comes to land development. So I think that's one of the areas we could look at that we could change on a local level that would allow us to provide some of this type of housing.
To come back to put a finer point on it a little bit, we just finished a project in Falmouth and South Stafford with a 60-lot development, and the average price to deliver that lot to us, cost-wise, was $80,000. And that's incorporating all the things we just talked about: environmental design, plan review, guidelines, all the things that we need to put into play to make the project attractive enough to even be considered by the jurisdiction. Other side of that is we've done an assessment with the Builders Association that shows that in Spotsylvania County, with this line we're talking about of affordability for the county and whether or not we're making money or costing money, is $340,000 for a house in Spotsylvania County. And again, if we're coming in below the line, with red numbers, we're not going to present that project, which prevents us from presenting projects even that may have some affordability with them.
Zoning refers to a vast set of regulations that determine where you can build, what you can build, and what activities you can engage in on your property. There seems to be a common misconception that there are plenty of zoned lots to build housing on, but developers and builders will not utilize these properties. Can you break down a jurisdiction's lot availability statistics and why our localities are severely short on properly zoned land to build on?
I'll start with that one, only because we here recently attempted to do that in Spotsylvania County, where we are primarily working. And one of the things we've run into consistently is the idea that the county has produced a list of the lots that have been improved over the past, and it shows that there are 11,156 lots available will be built on in Spotsylvania County over the last, or currently. That was as of the 1st of January this year. And we hear that a lot, and so it gets thrown back at us. Why do you need to do more development when you got all these lots? And so we obtained the list that the county produces, public information, and tried to understand it, because that's a good question. It's a legitimate question. And what we found in going through that, and I actually brought that list, of those supposed building lots, 4,959 were actually apartment units. So you could not build on them. We couldn't build anything, an apartment developer could on some of them, I suspect. But in addition to that, 1,207 were age-restricted lots, meaning that only homes lived in by the elderly or somebody over 55. In addition, some of those lots were in Lake Anna, because Lake Anna, part of Lake Anna is in Spotsylvania, so there's a recreational market that really doesn't affect what we do here at all. 1,363 of those lots were in communities that were rezoned 9 to 12 years ago, and because of proffer conditions that exist and are still in place, they're just not able to develop it. So what we're seeing now is those property owners are coming back trying to rezone those properties that are still in the books in order to make it feasible to develop them. And in the case of one of those communities, it was just last week, they approved a data center which wiped out over 1,800 lots that would have been on that property. So in the final analysis, we determined there was really about 2,756 viable building lots in Spotsylvania County. And that's for single-family or detached single-family homes. But when you look at that number, it was interesting that 982 of the 1,237 townhomes were actually in 2 subdivisions. And when you realize that builders, we don't build hundreds of homes in a year. You pace yourself, and in a subdivision, it's pretty typical to want to build like 50 homes a year. So in those 2 subdivisions, there's plenty of supply. But when you consider how that breaks down on an annual basis, we suddenly find ourselves really short. As a matter of fact, you hear the number 2%. 2% is a good, healthy growth rate. It's not healthy to not grow. If you don't grow, eventually it's going to catch up to you, and you're going to face other issues. And in Spotsylvania County, we have about 50,000 approximately housing units. And historically, we've averaged around 1,000 building permits a year. In 2021, there was 982 building permits issued. In 2022, that dropped to 738. And this year, we're on pace as of, I think it was the 1st of July, to do 356, which is about a 0.07% growth rate. So the idea that things are just exploding, there's houses being built everywhere, is not completely true. And when you look at the fact that those lots that are available, at the rate they're going away, the reality is in 3 or 4 years, we're going to have a housing crisis if we don't approve anything new, which is sort of the idea. We've got plenty, let's don't add anything to the mix. We're going to have a significant housing crisis. If you think it's bad today, with the increase of prices and the increase of interest rates we've seen and the lack of supply, because it is that lack of supply that drives prices. If you want to meet the need, if there's a balanced supply, then we're not going to say land's expensive. It's expensive because there's so few lots we can build on that the ones that are available end up costing a lot more. So hope that answers your question.
None of us will be able to give a better answer than Mike Jones to that. He and his company have spent a tremendous amount of time investigating that. But I thought I might drop a little information on the proffers system that Mike was talking about. There's a large number of lots undevelopable in Fredericksburg by our estimation because of how much it'll cost to deliver them, meaning that in order to get them approved, when they presented the project to the jurisdiction, they proffered. They promised to pay certain monies towards certain things. And in Virginia, those things are safety, your fire and sheriff, your parks and recreation, and your schools. And we, again, do the fiscal analysis, proffer narratives to find out what our impacts will be on those jurisdictions. And it's a fight. And again, we're watching that line. We're trying to stay above those red numbers all the time. And to Mike's point, these lots, the large number of these lots have been overpromised. They've said things that would essentially guarantee that the jurisdiction would approve them with no idea on how they'd ever deliver them. And frankly, some of the lots were probably rezoned with knowledge that they would never be developed. There are certain companies out there that have done that, and especially in our area. So it's a battle, and a recognition of those things by the jurisdictions would be very helpful in us getting back to more attainable lot prices.
Local leaders are tasked with managing jurisdictions' growing budgets with greater demand on county services. What zoning or regulatory reforms can be implemented at a local level to increase their residential building supply without overwhelming county services and their yearly budgets? So essentially, what's the solution going forward?
I don't know that there's one solution. I know one that's a hot topic that everybody's talking about, and it's very controversial, is ADUs. I know there's some jurisdictions allow it, some don't. Some allow a certain percentage square footage of the existing house. But you know, people are changing the way they want to live, and as a community, we need to adapt to that. People want property, an additional property. They want a detached garage with an apartment above it for their child that never wants to get out of the house or goes to college and decides to come back home. And I think we've all have seen some of that. I'm scared it's going to happen to me, though. But it's a reality. It's the way people want to live, and we need to give them the ability to do so. I mean, it's a great way to do it. An ADU is easy for people to do. If they have the space on the property, they're not impacting their wells, septic, water, sewer, can handle it. I don't see the issue.
In addition to the idea of designing communities differently that I mentioned a minute ago, I think at the core, the word is density. It's about being willing to increase density. That's going to reduce land costs, it's going to reduce development costs, it's going to make houses more affordable. You know, if I can only build one house on an acre or 3 acres, that's going to that just makes it unaffordable. If I can build 2 units, which we call a duplex, for example, and by the way, I can make a duplex look just like a really nice big house, but that drives the cost significantly. Or what if it's a triplex or a quadplex where you have 4 units on that same lot? You just affected the price significantly. Or take it a step further. Let me build a 24-unit condominium building. And now I've taken the cost of that 1 acre and I've shared it over 32 units, and I can deliver a house a lot cheaper to you. And it's a home that can be owned, that somebody can begin to be their first entry-level home that they can own. They can build wealth. They can get started, and then they'll have something later to move up to a different level of home. But those, however you want to look at it, even ADUs is about density. It boils down to density and the willingness to be willing to look at higher densities as a means of achieving affordability. And we can partner with community or with the localities to do that in a way that looks really good. So it doesn't have to affect your property values or increase the crime in your neighborhood or anything like that.
A little different tact, more than zoning or regulatory reform, I think local jurisdictions need to pay attention to their comprehensive plan. Through their comprehensive plan and other documents, they're telling us what they want, where they want it. And then when we try to come and deliver it where they said they wanted it, we are met with obstructions. Our local jurisdictions are fighting the rural sprawl. Stafford County is ripe with small country roads and big subdivisions that the roads aren't built to handle. It's spread out. We're willing to be in the targeted growth areas, but it's daggone expensive to be there. There's a lot more work to be done. There's a lot more expense to it. So local governments having the will, once again, to accept some density in the targeted growth areas where they say they want us to be would carry us down the road pretty far. So a willingness to mean what you say, a willingness to put it out there, say it, and mean what you say would be a good leap forward.
One of the things it's just been happening, and I get it, I understand, because I live in a little more rural area of the counties, and the down zonings that we're seeing. I watched it happen up in Prince William County in the rural Crescent. They went to 10-acre lots. Good luck finding something affordable. I mean, you can. I mean, I think you can get something just right at $1 million, maybe 1.2 in that area. So for that area of the county, it's affordable, 1.2. But they did that 10, 15 years ago in Prince William County, and now they're trying to figure out how to unwind it, and they're not having much luck. But it's a real pricey area to live in. So just be careful of downzoning.
Okay, we'll do our final question, and then we'll open it up to the audience for some questions, if you guys are good with that. Zoning changes often face resistance from local residents. How do you engage with communities to address concerns and build support for obtainable housing projects?
That's been a chore of sorts. It's, again, something that is a conversation we have almost daily with someone. And I think again, I started this session by saying it's great to have everybody in the room and have an opportunity to talk to so many at one time. So it's opportunities like this, GWRC continuing to carry the ball for us a little bit and engage the community in these ways is where we start to change the tides. But it's, again, and Mike said it earlier, it comes from the citizens and the impact on the politicians. And the citizens need to recognize that attainable housing is something that's necessary for our area. Traffic is the big four-letter word that is expressed when talking about things like density. But density in the targeted growth areas reduces traffic. If people can live close to where they work, they're not on the highways. And that's really something we talk about a lot as well, is workforce housing. Having the ability to live where you work instead of living in Stafford County and driving to Fairfax, living in Spotsylvania, driving to Prince William, living in Caroline and driving to Stafford. Those are the things that attribute issues to our traffic as well. So being willing to have the conversation, it really is a starting point with some of the politicians. I can't tell you how many that we start that conversation and the word is no before we even get anything out. So the willingness for you all to continue to participate with us in trying to find the solutions and us continue to drive our politicians to have the will to address the issues and help provide the solutions along with us.
Just an observation, because I think there is, in a lot of folks, an interest in dealing with this issue. But the real decision about it gets made in a board of supervisor or a council chamber when it's time to vote on a potential for a new community. That's where change happens. So we can talk a lot, but until we get there and somebody votes to approve something that's different, nothing changes. We, through the years, have proposed a number of projects that have incorporated aspects of affordable housing or attainable housing or workforce housing, whatever you call it. We've tried to champion that. And we propose different ideas that include proffers that help achieve that, or changing fees. So the ideas you've heard about today, we have put some of those on the table. And my point for saying that is that prior to that decision, where our community, through our elected officials, decides whether or not we're going to do this, there's always a public hearing. in all of my years, and all these projects and all these ideas, not one time has a person ever showed up and said, that's a good idea. I think we should consider that and support that as a county. Now, we had lots of folks show up and say, we don't want any more traffic on our roads. You know, we don't want any more houses. It's well enough. Let's just leave it alone. That's what we get. So the message being that at some point we've got to let our voices be heard. We've got to become that minor majority that we heard about today. We got to be willing to, if we really care about the issue more than we care, if we're willing to do something about it, we have to speak up. And I think that happens in public hearings that are across the region when developers put forth ideas that do promote these ideas. You've got to be willing to go there. And I understand that siding with the developer, you know, we're way below the attorneys and the lawyers and the politicians. We're sort of at the bottom. Matter of fact, over the years, I've seen bumper stickers that say, "Have a nice day, shoot a developer." You know, and I've seen T-shirts that say that as well. So I understand it's hard for people, you know, that somehow we're the bad guys and what we do is wrong, but the community has to begin to support the right things, the right development, the right growth. And until that happens, I spoke yesterday to a supervisor, a candidate who is not currently a supervisor that was running, and we were talking about some of these issues. And he started saying, well, when I knock on doors, all I hear is, you know, we don't want more. We're against growth. And that's what they're used to hearing. And so, therefore, everything gets shut down. And if we're going to make a difference, we're going to have to begin to speak up and let our voices be heard. And sadly, it's going to have to be in conjunction with developers that are trying to do something, because that's where the change happens.
I think at the end of the day, we just need to figure out how to get more people in housing. And it's unfortunate. I just read an article recently about how Virginia is losing home ownership, that we're the fastest going down or losing state in the country of home ownership. There's more renter, I think we're in the mid-60s right now, and we were 8% higher than that at one point. But the gentleman in the last session at lunch put a problem out there about a couple that drug addicted and had problems, homeless, and what can you do for those people? What would you do? I think the best thing you can do is find a way to get them into a home and get them to buy the home and have ownership. We all know home ownership. The people that buy houses have a stake in the community. They're the people that go to the PTA meetings, volunteer at the schools, volunteer at Parks and Rec, and help out. And we just have to find the way to do that. And that's going to be the best thing to help those people actually get some wealth in their lifetime. Owning a home is the number one way to gain wealth. I think it's somewhere around $33 trillion in home equity in this country currently. I mean, I know we had a little bump in the chart. You can look at the chart in 08, it dipped off, and we lost about 1.2, 1.4 trillion. And we were about $8.4 trillion in equity. Now it's at $33 trillion in equity. That's the best thing we can do for anybody who's below that poverty line, help them get into a home and own a home.
I think one of the exciting parts of this opportunity is we in the building industry need to do a better job with messaging. We in the building industry are one of the largest local employers in the area. You know, where does that get lost in our conversation? We're not doing a good enough job of that. One of the favorite, I want to come back to this. I didn't realize I'd gone down the ladder from attorney to development. But that was a little surprising, because this is a great industry. They're great people, and like I said, we're one of the largest local employers. And one of my favorite sayings that I've heard since being engaged with the builders is that if you live in a home, thank a builder. You know, that's the bottom line. If you're living in a home, somebody in the building industry built that home for you. So we're asking for that opportunity to be made available to someone else. And last, I guess part of the messaging too is the tax burden that is placed on the citizens. If we don't have growth, if you do not have new residents, then you're asking that tax burden to continue to be on the shoulders of the people that already live here. And we don't have to look far to see an example of that when Stafford County was proposing a 31-cent increase on the real estate taxes. You know, I say that's a direct correlation to their resistance to growth and smart growth. So I think with all the issues that we've talked about outside of our control, we in the building industry need to do a better job with you all in our messaging and telling you the good things that we are doing and how hard we really are working to try and deliver attainable housing to our community.
Are we good, Chip? Or all right, I guess that's it. We got the timer, so thank you, everyone.